In this episode of American Greed, in the war on identity theft,
This is a legit account because you know I'm going to check it.
there is a new enemy.
The drugs that sit there, and I fight the temptation. The temptation is...
One who is dedicated, resourceful, and addicted to meth.
I had gotten addicted to going into a bank and using somebody else's name and walking out with $1,000.
And later,
when he enters a bank, he's very commanding. He immediately takes control of the situation.
a mysterious bank robber who's not afraid of violence or the police.
Points a gun at people and tells them he will shoot them. I believe that he will follow through on those threats if it comes to it.
Who is the Wheaton Bandit?
I had a chiropractic appointment that morning, and I was coming into town to attend that.
On a Saturday afternoon, Virginia Dissette is pulled over for speeding. Her luck turns from bad to worse when the officer tells her there is a warrant out for her arrest.
And I said, "Nah, you're joking." And he goes, "No." I said, "What are the charges?" He said, "Felony forgery."
The wife and mother is taken into custody and booked into the county jail for a crime she didn't commit.
It was a shocker, and it was scary because I knew that I had done nothing wrong.
2 months earlier, Dissette's wallet had been stolen out of her car, and the thief took more than the woman's money.
There'd been somebody arrested who had stolen my identity and had been using it, and so to find out that there had been a warrant out for my arrest for felony forgery, I just knew this is definitely not right.
Dissette sits in the lockup while her husband tries to gather $10,000 for bail.
I waited, and I waited, and I watched them haul off one or two people in little orange jumpsuits because they couldn't post bail, and I was scared.
At the end of the day, her husband makes it back with the money, and Dissette is released, but she is not happy.
I was victimized when my ID was stolen, and I've been victimized again by the system. What happened?
I called her up, and she was readily talking with me, and I thought, well, I've got the wrong person here now.
The warrant for Dissette's arrest originated with Denver detective Jim Rock, who has been investigating a case of counterfeit checks with Dissette's name on them.
Her identification is used. The teller identifies, she just tells me, the person presenting me this check, identifying herself as Virginia Dissette, appeared to be that person on the ID.
But the real Virginia Dissette is not the one cashing the checks.
They were actually dressing women up to look like me, wearing wigs to get my hair colored.
This is a picture. You can see she's got her sunglasses on and her hair. They felt matched quite a bit.
Detective Rock learned that a woman has already been arrested in another county for using Dissette's ID, a woman named Roberta Corcoran.
Roberta Corcoran was linked to a whole lot of individuals and a whole lot of checks. And we're not just talking checks with the name of Dissette on here.
The detective begins to unravel a tangled web of identity thieves and forgers, a group whose members are bound by one thing: meth addiction.
I don't know of many people that were doing meth that weren't involved with identity theft.
In 2002, Tammy Carroll is a meth addict and part of the identity theft ring that has stolen Dissette's ID, her money, and her freedom.
Somebody would go steal a purse and bring it to me, and, I'd give them $50 or a little bit of drugs or something like that.
Tammy has learned the illegal trade from her meth associates, concluding how to steal information as easily as possible from trash bins, or even better, from the mail.
You would look for, with residential, the red flag is up. Normally, if the red flag is up in a residential neighborhood, the only reason that would be is they're mailing out a letter or a bill.
With stolen documents, Tammy creates phony checks using commonly available software.
You don't necessarily even have to have an actual check in front of you if you have their banking information, like a statement with the account number.
Members of the group then use other people's IDs mostly stolen from purses and wallets to cash the checks. The scheme is easy and lucrative.
If I did it 3-4 days a week, then I do it at least a couple checks a day, 900 each, so 4,000 a week maybe, at least.
But cash is not the sole motive for Tammy's greed. Nearly all of her profit is spent on meth, a drug particularly suited to the crime of identity theft.
It's a drug that allows them not only to function, but function for very long periods of time, making identities, making checks, spending time to get the drug so they don't have to do other things to make money.
Identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America. Methamphetamine is the fastest growing drug habit. In Colorado and states across the country, these crimes are inextricably linked. Denver Assistant DA Joe Morales sees the connection every day.
We take out big rings of identity thefts. I would say of those, 80% of them have some drug connection, and of that drug, it's the most popular drug is methamphetamine.
They're out there about 3 in the morning. They grab the mail. They get done about 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're already printing the checks up in the car, parked in the lots, waiting for the business to open.
Detective Jim Rock brings his case to the DA's office, and a multi-jurisdictional group of investigators comes together to put a stop to the crime ring that victimized Virginia Dissette.
And typically what you will see in these groups is, as we see in this case, one of them gets sloppy, one of them makes a bad decision, or a clerk gets wise to what's going on, and they're caught.
4 months later, Tammy Carroll is caught when she purchases stolen IDs from a police informant.
She led us to an individual, and they led us to another individual. And the individual that kind of the bottom lined at was a guy by the name of Michael Schreckengost. And Schreckengost was a heavy methamphetamine user, and he was deep into counterfeiting these checks.
Michael Schreckengost is top dog of the loose-knit group of up to 40 ID thieves, all addicted to meth and raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent funds.
He would enlist them. He would print up the checks. If they didn't have an ID, he would make them an ID.
He had people all over going for him, and he would, get half the money, and that's how he did it. He was paying people to commit crimes.
The case becomes known for one of Schreckengost's more memorable scams.
We call this the Harley case because the main suspect in this case used a counterfeit check to buy a Harley-Davidson motorcycle.
Under an assumed identity, Schreckengost had paid more than $17,000 for the Harley. He used what is known as a convenience check, sent by credit card companies to their customers.
This is a convenience check.
The check had been stolen from a woman's mailbox before she even knew it was there.
But they went out and bought a bike with that check because she had a $25,000 credit limit.
For victim Virginia Dissette, the damage is much worse.
I'm in jail. I'm sitting there waiting for somebody to do something to prove me innocent.
After being wrongfully arrested, Dissette has to work to get back money stolen from her checking account.
They bought printers and computer stuff, and it was obviously things that they bought in order to propagate this forgery ring that they were involved in.
And not only that, her credit started going down because they were using her name and her driver's license, and everything was being reported as a bad credit to her. So not only did she have to worry about being arrested, but she had to worry about her credit history being completely ruined.
Dissette's story is more motivation for the team of investigators to put a stop to the Harley group. Over the next 6 months, they pieced together a complex, organized crime case.
We had 31 named suspects that we were able to identify that had actually passed checks.
And as the investigators begin closing in on their suspects, Detective Rock decides to become a regular at Michael Schreckengost's house.
He had cameras in the trees. He had cameras mounted on his roof. He had cameras covering the backyard. So he was really paranoid. And I just kind of added to the fire. I'd drive out there, bang on the door. They wouldn't answer the door, but he knew I was there. He had the cameras on me. And just let him know that we knew who he was, and we were going to be talking real close one day. Every time they turned around, there was a police agency there throughout the whole metro area.
In Denver, Colorado, a team of investigators is zeroing in on a criminal identity theft ring.
We had 53 different victims whose checks or IDs had been compromised.
For up to a year, the group has been operating in the Denver area, racking up victims and cash.
$250,000 loss and more than 850 transactions.
The group's ringleader is named Michael Schreckengast. Like everyone involved in the crime ring, he has turned to identity theft in order to support his addiction to meth. On July 31st, 2002, Schreckengast makes a fatal mistake.
He got lazy. He went in. He used a very bad ID. He tried to use the name of Benjamin Bryce Taiwan Kim. And then he tried to use a check that had been used before, and they were wise to it. And the police were called, and he didn't run, and we caught him. And from then on, we were able to link all the other parties together.
Also arrested is Tammy Carroll, who has been stealing identities and forging checks for almost a year.
I was looking for the next high on a daily basis, trying to figure out where the next check was going to come from.
Michael Schreckengast is sentenced to 10 years in prison under Colorado's organized crime statute. For Tammy Carroll, the judge reserves a far worse sentence.
And he said, "You're a drug addict and you're always going to be a drug addict, and I don't ever want to see your kids in your care again."
3 of Tammy's children are already in foster care, and the judge decides to place her youngest child up for adoption.
No other sentence in the world could have been worse. Prison, anything, than hearing that. I decided to change my life that day.
Tammy is eventually allowed to forego her prison sentence and does time in a drug treatment center instead.
I just want everybody to know that Friday night group that I do now, it's called the Road to Sobriety. We've been doing it.
Today, Tammy Carroll is clean and sober. She now works with people dealing with addictions of their own.
I am using my past as a way to help others instead of it just being all wasted time.
And after 3 years apart, Tammy's 3 oldest children have been returned to her.
I work now, and I make in a month what I used to make in a day. So it's different, but I feel so much better about myself. There's nothing, no drug, no check, no fraud, no identity theft in the world can make me feel like I do today.
While Tammy has been able to reclaim her life, Virginia Doucette is still trying to put hers together. After being victimized by the identity thieves and wrongfully arrested, the charges against Doucette have been dropped, but her arrest record remains.
When the charges have been dropped, it's for lack of evidence. It's not because you were innocent. It's because we don't have enough evidence to prove that you did it. So we're going to have to let it go. Well, that's not good enough.
And there is no end in sight to the growing problems of identity theft and meth addiction. But Colorado has decided to fight back.
Let's talk about West Metro, North Metro. We don't need names today. Just give me some general idea where we're at with that.
At the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, there is a new team of agents at work. They are known as Criminal Fraud Investigators, or CFI.
I just briefly gone through the reports. There's a lot of compromised checking accounts.
We're looking for those templates and those informations, photos of the group that they have used.
And they are tasked with cracking one of Colorado's most prolific crimes. Identity theft is a problem that affects not just individual victims, but major financial institutions. For Colorado banks, the losses to identity theft fraud have been growing for nearly a decade.
It's enormous, and that has meant it's been our #1 priority for about a half a dozen years. Bankers started complaining about it around 2000. We then put together an estimate that fraud costs Colorado banks $150 million a year.
Last year, the Colorado Bankers Association decided to take action. They created legislation that provides dedicated funding for the CBI fraud unit. Agents Kirsten Gregg and Donya Davis are part of the team.
Well, today we're going to go look for a woman. Her name is Kimberly, and she's an identity thief, and she's also a meth addict.
The suspect is Kimberly Merritt. She has already confessed to stealing the identities of at least 4 women.
Between October of last year to March this year, she was able to scam $140,000 or thereabouts.
Merritt and her associates allegedly gain access to their victims' personal information with a file-sharing application called LimeWire. They search for unsecured computers and secretly download banking information and social security numbers.
She would memorize their information, go out and purchase vehicles, get lines of credit, open up credit card accounts, buy cell phones. She stole quite a bit of money.
For these agents, it's a typical identity theft case with close ties to the meth trade.
So if you come across an identity theft case, a lot of times you'll come across the methamphetamine as well. Almost like 9 out of 10 cases, they're linked.
The suspect is currently out on bond, and the agents believe she could be targeting even more victims, committing new identity thefts in order to fund her meth habit.
We suspect that she could be continuing criminal activity, so we want to go out and see what she's up to. If she's there, we want to talk to her, do a little bit of follow-up in our investigation, maybe follow around, see if she's doing anything she shouldn't be doing.
We're looking for Kim. Do you have any idea where she's at?
Colorado Bureau of Investigation agents Donya Davis and Kirsten Gregg are hot on the trail of an identity thief, and they have invited American Greed to ride along. The suspect's name is Kim Merritt. She has confessed to stealing the identities of 4 innocent women, and she is out on bond.
She stole quite a bit of money, and assuming these women's identity are probably going to have to take years to rehab their credit.
Merritt, like most of Denver's identity thieves, is also a meth addict.
It's always good also to keep an eye on your suspects that you're investigating. They don't stop their criminal activity, so it's good to keep an eye on them.
25 miles outside Denver, in the desolate plains, Gregg and Davis arrive at Kim's last known address, an RV that belongs to the suspect's boyfriend.
Where's Kim at?
I don't know.
She's not living with you?
You don't mind if we step in there?
She is in there.
She's in there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we need to speak to her, okay?
Inside the RV, agents find Kim Merritt. She is surrounded by credit documents, the first clue to possible financial fraud.
How are you doing? We need to speak to you. I need to see how you're holding up and what you're doing here, and I can see you're doing the same identity theft.
After reading the woman her Miranda rights, Agent Davis questions Merritt about the papers in her possession.
And this account, did you use anybody else's social security number when you opened this account?
No, ma'am.
This is a legit account? Because you know I'm going to check it.
Yeah.
Merritt denies any other identity theft or fraud, but the agents aren't too quick to believe her.
Okay, last name is Merritt. M-E-R-R-I-T-T.
While Agent Gregg calls in to check on possible warrants, Agent Davis spots drug paraphernalia near the suspect.
I do see that there is a crack pipe right here. So you've been using drugs here?
When was the last time you used?
Not today.
Not today.
Okay.
When I then prompted her on if there were any drugs still there, she initially denied it and then said that she did have just a little bit left. She then showed me the small clear plastic baggie that had the suspected methamphetamine.
The drugs that sits there, and I fight the temptation.
Remember what I said to you, it makes it even harder if you have it sit right there.
So classic case of an identity thief who's sitting there looking at her documents and finding out what she has, and then her addiction right next to her.
In addition to the meth, agents find several credit cards in Merritt's purse. More possible evidence of identity theft.
Those are legit me and my name. You can call.
What's on the prepaid? Anything on it?
$1.
Okay.
And that's my Sam's Club card.
Okay.
It's free.
I'm always afraid to sometimes open the fridge.
There was some documentation in there. It looks like envelopes
from the loan that we had previously known about. The credit cards, even though she says it's a prepaid credit card, still very concerning. You know, how did she get that? There was a credit card statement in there. Obviously, we're going to have to look at that. So it's very concerning. And obviously, she admitted she's still using drugs, which she claims is why she does all of this.
A warrant comes back on Merritt for violating probation on a previous identity theft conviction, and she will have to go to jail.
Okay, just go ahead and put your hands down below your lower back. Just relax, just relax.
You are under arrest for the warrant.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
She said it was the drugs. It's the drugs that make her do all this. And it's just an all-consuming lifestyle that all they care about is their next fix and how to stay high and how to get there. And if you're not working, how do you pay for that drug habit? And it's very easy for them to go into the identity theft.
What happened? I heard bits and pieces, but I didn't hear the story.
Well, we did go out there, and she was there, and she was in the trailer, surrounded by documents with her meth pipe right next to her and her little bindle of meth with her.
Okay, good. Well, that case is having a good result.
And it's continuing. There is really no final stage to it until she's convicted, because she could very well be out today and back at it again.
The agents are left to build a case against Kim Merritt before she targets even more victims, like Anita Jans.
I was on the phone talking to a mortgage broker. I was shopping for a better rate on my mortgage of my current home. And he goes, "Oh, I see you have more than one mortgage." And I go, no, I don't think so. What?
In September of 2005, Jans learns that someone has stolen her identity and bought nearly $1 million in properties in her name.
You're just like in panic and scared, and what am I responsible for? And so in trying to figure out what to do, and then you're trying to call and contact the mortgage companies, the title companies.
The average victim of identity theft spends 600 hours cleaning up their credit. After 8 months of trying to do it on her own, Jans decides to call in professional help. ID Watchdog is a young company getting in on the ground floor of the identity theft protection and rehab industry.
Number one, they come to us to make sure that it's done completely, and they come to us to make sure that they don't have to spend their own time doing it.
So you want to hear about the latest?
I do.
Okay, well, good.
Now, the end of Jans's credit nightmare is finally in sight.
In about a week, they should have a clearance letter and everything taken care of from your credit report standpoint.
Wow. I can't tell you what good news this is.
And individuals are not the only ones seeking professional help. Businesses are suffering losses upwards of $48 billion a year to identity theft fraud. Now companies are starting to take matters into their own hands. They are attempting to outsmart the thieves by hiring one of their own.
And that's where companies hire us to physically go in, or sometimes remote, and break into their facility and see if we can get a hold of their data by just walking in the front door and taking something.
Jim Stickley owns a company called Trace Security, and it's his job to make sure employers are protected from identity theft. He does that by stealing from them.
We have a huge success rate. When we go, a new organization hires us, we go in. If we get caught, it's almost a surprise to us at this point. It's really easy.
In one of Stickley's most common schemes, he dresses as a fire inspector, enters a business, such as a bank, and tells employees he needs to do an inspection.
You know, we don't say we're with the fire department. Our shirt is a very generic shirt. We do have a fake badge, but the badge just says that we're there to do a fire inspection. It doesn't have anything official at all. But we look good. You know, we're in this little uniform. And they go, "Oh, okay." And they just give you the keys to the kingdom. We say, "Okay, we're going to walk your whole facility." We always have our black bags that are empty. And we just go, and the main thing we go after is their data center, and we steal all their backup tapes.
Close to 90% of the time, Stickley and his crew gain access to the business's customer files.
And if you're at a bank and you have their backup tapes, that's every customer, social security number, mother's maiden name. It's everything you ever had. And we just walk out the front door with it.
Luckily, Stickley is one of the good guys. Instead of turning stolen identities into cash, he returns his loot to the business and tells them what went wrong.
We go back a couple days later and we meet with their staff, and they see all the stuff that we got, and they're just floored. You know, first of all, that we were there in a uniform just a couple days earlier, and now we're there in street clothes, and they realize they're putting it together in the room and going, this guy wasn't who he was supposed to be. And, you know, I'm not silver-tongued, but I'm just a nice, average guy, and that's all it takes.
For Stickley, committing identity theft would be easy, and the real criminals know this all too well. Anita Jans believes the best way to stop identity theft is to avoid becoming a victim in the first place.
These people who are dishonest, they don't want your property or your car or your stereo. They want your identity because they can do a lot more with that. That's your most precious commodity is what I want people to know. And so you have to live differently, be more aware.
Coming up on American Greed, a robber who steals for more than just money.
Maybe it's more for thrill-seeking, maybe just for the adrenaline rush.
And grows more commanding with each hit.
I just prayed that he wouldn't get so nervous that he would shoot us.
The hunt is on for the Wheaton Bandit. Wheaton, Illinois, an affluent western suburb of Chicago, that to the outside world appears to be as safe an apple pie as any suburb can be. It's considered a nice place to raise a family. But since 2002, one shadow hangs ominously over this city, a serial bank robber, armed and ready for a fight, who has hit 16 times and is still walking the streets. In the early morning hours, the bandit hides in these bushes, waiting for tellers to open the bank. As the employees stand at the door, the bandit strikes, gun in hand. Once inside, he orders the tellers to unlock the vault and hand over their money drawers. He grabs the cash himself, then forces the tellers to the floor, warning them not to do anything for 5 minutes or else he'll come back. He disappears into the early morning with nearly $14,000. Police and the FBI call him the Wheaton Bandit.
This was the first robbery.
Tina Forkas and Eric Cayley are the FBI agents in charge of the Wheaton Bandit investigation.
What we believe he probably hid here, and then this way you could keep a clear line of sight and watch the employees as they arrived at work that morning, and then just discreetly go down the hill here and be able to catch them as they were entering the bank for the morning.
From this vantage point, the bandit can plan his attack and his escape.
And directly on the other side of this wood line is a small subdivision. It has a cul-de-sac located directly behind the wood line, which could provide a perfect escape route for him if he was to park a car.
Tellers describe the Wheaton Bandit as a white male in his 20s or 30s, tall with a medium build. He's dressed in a coat, jeans, gym shoes, gloves, and a mask.
The Wheaton Bandit robber, the tactical hood that he wears, is not a typical ski mask that we see a lot in bank robberies. It's considered a balaclava, which is a tactical hood. You often see it used by undercover drug agents, SWAT operators, and military personnel.
One of the things that does stand out in most of these robberies is that most of the tellers have said he does have very striking blue eyes.
The eyes behind the mask are one of the few clues police have.
One of the things that he's done early on was try to rob banks in inclement weather. I mean, it gives him a good excuse to cover up his face and cover up his head.
Police say the serial bank robber is becoming more bold and more aggressive, and they're sure he will strike again.
The Wheaton Bandit returns to this small branch and robs it for a third time.
I looked towards the door, and there's the man standing there with a gun pointing at me.
Janet England has been a teller for 17 years. Today is the first time she's come face to face with a robber or a gun.
I could not look at this man. I was too scared to look up at him. And he said, "I know you have more money." And I said, I have no more money, and I put my hands like this, I would not look at him. I just prayed that he wouldn't get so nervous that he would shoot us.
What the bandit says next gives police a possible clue.
He got really nervous and very mad at me when he saw that I had a dye pack in the drawer.
A dye pack is a small explosive charge that, when detonated, stains the money and sometimes the robber.
He said to me, he says, "What do you think I am, stupid?" He said, "I used to work in a bank, and I know what that is."
The wintry robberies may help shield the bandit's identity, but they also give police more clues, his shoe prints and escape routes.
The Wheaton bandit ran out of the bank, came across this grassy area, which happened to have snow at the time.
Wheaton detective Steve Hamill retraces one escape.
He ran down the sidewalk here. As he gets up to the next block, you can see in the snow where he turns to the left. It was about halfway down the block where you can see he's got a car parked. It's a one-way street, and you can see footprints leading up to the driver's side of the door, which indicate to us that he is working alone.
As lead investigator, Hamill searches for why the bandit strikes.
Investigations, Hamill. We don't believe he has a drug habit. We don't believe that this is driven by a gambling problem. The dollar amounts that he's been getting wouldn't indicate that.
He may not necessarily be doing these robberies just for money alone, that maybe it's more for thrill-seeking, maybe just for the attention, for the adrenaline rush that he gets when he does the robberies.
On May 10th, 2003, the bandit strikes for the 7th time. His take is nearly $17,000. The FBI studies the Wheaton bandit, taking note of his unique habits or signatures.
The Wheaton bandit does what is considered indexing the weapon. That is, as he's holding the weapon, he actually keeps his finger along the slide of the gun and not in the trigger. It's a safety precaution that is used by many people who are trained in firearms, including military and law enforcement.
We do believe that the Wheaton bandit uses a police scanner. The witnesses said that he would say, "I have a police scanner. I know if you'll call the police."
In reviewing the video surveillance footage from Wheaton bandit robberies, there are several images that lead us to believe that the Wheaton bandit is possibly wearing body armor under his clothing. A soft body armor, similar to the one I'm holding here, oftentimes causes outlines on a layer of clothing if worn underneath.
These signatures suggest that the bandit may have police or military training.
What's very alarming to us is the fact that he does have the body armor on. I mean, you wear body armor because you don't want to get shot, and that tells me that he's prepared to exchange gunfire with responding police officers or FBI agents.
8 hits through 2003 net the bandit almost $84,000. What law enforcement has learned up to this point leads to a disturbing hypothesis. When we return, could the Wheaton bandit be a police officer?
If he is law enforcement, is he current law enforcement? And if he is current law enforcement, how much of what we know and what we're doing does he know? That's the bad part.
For more information and special web exclusives, log on to americangreed.cnbc.com. What you are watching is the Wheaton bandit in action. The date is August 28, 2003. He's fully disguised, gun drawn, threatening tellers.
When he enters, then he would actually order all the employees to the floor.
Since his spree began in 2002, the Wheaton bandit has eluded authorities. Special Agent Tina Forkas and Eric Cayley are tasked with chasing him down.
If there's tellers that are down on the floor, he makes them get back up. He will give them orders directly to remove their cash drawers by placing the trays up on this counter.
The Department of Justice classifies a criminal like the Wheaton bandit as a professional bank robber. He hits at different times of day when few customers are present. He gives himself clear exit paths. He uses a disguise to defeat bank identification systems. And in more than 5 years, he has hit 16 times, failing only once. It's 6:37 a.m., and the Wheaton Bandit returns to the scene of his first robbery. He's once again hiding in the bushes, waiting to attack.
I was already in the bank. I had come in to check everything out, make sure everything in the bank was secure. I went back to this front door to let the teller in.
Jennifer is a teller supervisor for West Suburban Bank.
I heard sticks breaking in the back corner by the drive-up ATM sign. I told her to hurry up, and I said, somebody's coming. And that's when she turned and ran into the bank, and I locked the doors as he grabbed for the handle to open the door.
Finding himself locked out, the would-be robber turns and flees. Both women are terribly shaken, but Jennifer's will isn't broken.
It was a bad thing to happen, but it doesn't mean I'm going to leave my career and change my career. He's not going to force me out of it.
Suburban police are on the lookout for a serial bank robber tonight, a gunman who has held up 7 banks and a credit union over the past 2 years.
The new year starts off with a bang. The Wheaton Bandit hits this credit union in Winfield, a suburb bordering Wheaton. His take, nearly $17,000.
This is the credit union that was hit on January 22nd, 2004. The Wheaton Bandit walked in, took over the bank, pointed a handgun at the tellers, ordering everyone to the ground, had to put their drawers up on top, removed all the money himself. He was in and out in 60 seconds. Surveillance tape shows him running this way where he believed he had a car waiting for him, and he left from there.
To improve their chances of identifying the Wheaton Bandit, banks and law enforcement turn to a reliable weapon, a cash reward of $5,000.
Historically, rewards work. Ask FBI or law enforcement. When a reward is put out, it gets people's attention.
The reward soon grows to $25,000.
We're hoping that someone in the public will try to help out law enforcement, help out their community, and also collect that reward money.
While rewards are great for capturing robbers, banks are focusing more of their efforts on preventing robberies. An effective deterrent is a greeter in the bank's lobby.
A greeter is simply an employee that seeks to engage a customer as they're walking into the bank, make eye contact with that person to let that person know they're being watched and they're welcomed into the institution, but also being watched by the institution.
So why not station an armed guard at the door, a greeter with a gun?
There is no guarantee that a bank will not get robbed if there is an armed guard at the front door. If a bank was to get robbed with an armed guard, historically and statistically, the chances of something bad happening drastically increase.
Banks are also creating policies to deter potential bank robbers. One policy is called No Hats, No Hoods, No Sunglasses.
The No Hats, No Hoods, No Sunglasses program is really intended to discourage prospective bank robbers from even attempting to rob a bank.
West Suburban Bank is one of the first banks in Illinois to implement the program.
The program is pretty simple. We post a sign at the front doors of every one of our branches, and we ask our customers to remove any hats, hoods, sunglasses upon entering our banks.
By the end of 2004, the Wheaton Bandit has pulled off 9 successful bank robberies. Despite deterrence and their best efforts, police believe he will strike again. When American Greed returns, the investigation heats up as the Wheaton Bandit makes a critical mistake. In 2005, the Wheaton Bandit is again making news.
Tonight, a serial bank robber is still on the move, and the FBI wants your help to try to track him down.
On January 14th, he strikes for the 11th time at a Mid-America bank in Glen Ellen, Illinois. Within the next 12 months, the Wheaton Bandit hits 2 more banks in Chicago's western suburbs, bringing his total to 13. Law enforcement needs to catch a break. On November 29, 2006, they get one. A possible eyewitness.
We're at the Fifth Third Bank. That was the 14th robbery. It was hit on November 29th of 2006. He hit approximately about 4:50, just 10 minutes before they closed. Approximately 1 hour before that, we had a witness in a car stating that he ran into the possible suspect that he encountered right over by that stop sign there. He went to talk to him. He thought it was his brother. When he realized it wasn't, he kind of stopped and feel that he startled him, gave him no sorry wave. As he left, he looked back in his mirror and noticed that the guy was still standing there.
That eyewitness helps police artists develop this sketch of a potential suspect. But before the sketch can go public, the bandit strikes again. On December 1st, the Wheaton Bandit robs this bank in Geneva, Illinois. 6 days later, he robs another in Glen Ellen. Then, on December 11, 2006, the sketch is released. The Wheaton Bandit vanishes, and the robberies stop.
There's some talk, is this a swan song for him? You know, is this the grand finale, three bank robberies in 8 days? I do not think this is a grand finale. It's almost as if he's taunting police and FBI agents to a certain degree.
We may find that if he does rob another bank, that he may go outside of his comfort zone a little bit, thinking that, that was a close one and he almost got caught, so he better be a little bit more cautious on the next one.
Historically, bank robbers have counted on disguises to help hide their identities. But what about the quality of bank surveillance?
In years past, recorders usually tape over the tape over and over again, and the images begin to be faded when they're transmitted to law enforcement.
So you might have a videotape that was used and replayed and recorded over many hundreds of times. And so when that robbery actually occurred, you have a very grainy picture.
Today, the digital revolution is changing bank security options. One company named 3VR Security has introduced intelligent video management systems, which uses facial recognition technology to alert bank personnel when a known fraud artist or robber enters a bank.
Why don't we first of all go through our suspect list, quickly go through the ones that we have not ruled out yet.
With the Wheaton Bandit investigation about to enter its 5th year, police and the FBI joined forces to create a task force. They process more than 100 tips and investigate dozens of suspects.
46 and 47. 46 ruled out physical description. 47, he was in prison during 2 of the robberies.
In April of 2007, the reward also increases to $50,000. What investigators need now is for one person to step forward and identify the Wheaton Bandit.
Hopefully it will be a tip that comes in, just having the awareness that this individual is out there and being able to notice something about him, either that he's spending too much money or that he wears the type of clothing that are in these photographs.
The police and FBI are ready and waiting for that call and their next shot at closing the Wheaton Bandit case.
You do take pride in what you do in this profession, and that does become a little insulting, and, rightfully so. He's done his part of the job very well. Now we have to do ours.
If you have information about the Wheaton Bandit robberies, please call the Chicago FBI at 312-421-6700. In an upcoming episode, a Chicago doctor panics when the feds catch on to his $1 million insurance scheme.
Kept on billing for surgeries when they weren't rendered.
Will he go as far as murder to protect his lifestyle?
Nobody in the world had any motive to kill Joyce Brandon except for Ron Mikos.
Find out next time on American Greed.
He would never truly take it off. Chapter 4, The Domestic Mirage. Release from prison didn't reform Gerald Barnbaum. It merely provided him with a new stage. Within months of his release for good behavior, he had discarded his inmate blues for a crisp white lab coat once again. The name remained the same, Dr. Gerald Barnes. By 1996, the performance had reached its peak. He wasn't just a doctor anymore. He was a husband, Lisa Roberts was a woman in love, swept off her feet by a man who showered her with flowers, concerts, and the prestige of being a doctor's wife. He was so romantic, Lisa would later recall, her voice breaking. He made me believe in a future I had only dreamed of. They lived a life of six-figure salaries and suburban comfort. Lisa planned for children, for a private practice of their own. Every morning, she kissed her husband goodbye as he headed to the executive health group in Los Angeles, never doubting for a second that the man she shared a bed with was anyone other than the respected medical director he claimed to be. But the ghost of the past has a way of showing up uninvited. At an industry Christmas party, Barnbaum stood with a sticker on his lapel. "Hi, I'm Dr. Barnes." He was holding a drink, laughing with colleagues, when he locked eyes with a man who felt like a cold wind from a graveyard. Rick D'Alessandro was there. 16 years had passed, but Rick would never forget the likable little guy who had killed John Mackenzie. "Hi, Rick, how you doing?" Barnbaum asked, his voice steady, though his heart must have been a drumbeat of panic. Rick looked him dead in the eye. "Well, Gerald, I'm not doing too well, because you're doing the same thing you did back in the 70s. The mask didn't slip, not entirely." "Well, this is all just a big mistake," Barnbaum replied smoothly. "I can go home and get all the information to prove it." He walked out of that party and disappeared. But this time, Rick wasn't the only one watching. Chapter 5. The Bureau's Blind Spot. FBI agent Murray Kinjofsky couldn't believe the file landing on her desk. The man they were looking for, Gerald Barnbaum, hadn't just been treating random civilians. He had been the primary physician for over 100 FBI agents. He performed their physicals. Murray told her supervisor, her face pale. "Our agents, the people trained to spot deception stripped down and let a con man listen to their hearts." The irony was as thick as the medical charts Barnbaum had forged. He had been hired by a major medical corporation without a single thorough background check. If they had checked his fingerprints, they would have found a rap sheet spanning decades. If they had looked at his history, they would have seen the ghost of John Mackenzie. When the FBI finally arrested him in October 1996, Lisa Roberts stood in their living room, watching the life she knew dissolve into a collection of evidence bags. "I didn't know his real name," she whispered to the agents. "I didn't know his real age. Who was I sleeping next to?" In court, Barnbaum played a new role, the dying man. At 62, he claimed to have prostate cancer and diabetes. He wept for his grandchildren, for his sick body. But the judge was a critic who had seen too many bad plays. "I'm convinced that if I were to set you free," the judge said, his voice echoing in the silent chamber, "there is a 100% chance you would do this again." He was sentenced to 12.5 years. But even then, the theater wasn't over. Part 2. The Interstate Phantom. Chapter 6. The Entrepreneur of Bloomington. While Gerald Barnbaum was rotting in a cell, thinking of his next role. A man named David Brankel was reinventing the American dream in Bloomington, Indiana. David was a man of impeccable taste. He wore tailored suits that suggested old money and new ideas. He moved into a small office in a building owned by Phil and Bonnie Sperry, a well-regarded couple in the title business. It's about architecture and construction, Phil, David said, spreading blueprints across a mahogany desk. His company was called Acker. We're not just building structures, we're building legacies. David was smooth. He was cool. He had an answer for every question before it was even asked. He befriended Bonnie, sensing a vulnerability, a desire to be part of something grander. He proposed a joint venture, a high-end interior design firm called Trade Secrets. You have the eye, Bonnie. I have the infrastructure, he told her over lunch at the finest bistro in town. But David's infrastructure was a house of cards. He used the Sperry name as a skeleton key to open doors throughout Bloomington. He went to Sullivan's clothing store, a local institution. He ran up a $1,700 bill, paid it off instantly to build trust, then asked for a house account. Within weeks, he had walked away with $8,000 worth of designer clothing. When the bills came due, David was nowhere to be found. He was a nomad of the heartland. He moved his wife and young son to Vincennes, Indiana, presenting himself as a high-powered consultant for Vanguard Capital Marketing Group out of Chicago. "We need a developer," said Alan Logan, owner of Logan's Wet Pets and More. He and his wife Becky wanted to build a family entertainment complex called Logan's Great Escape. When they met David, they thought he was an answer to their prayers. He had the brochures, the contracts, the timelines. He looked like success incarnate. "I need a $3,500 retainer," David said, his voice steady, "and $500 a month. I'm heading to Chicago for another project tomorrow, so I need to know ASAP." The Logans wrote the check. They didn't know that David Brankel's projects didn't involve blueprints. They involved interstates, fishing hats, and demand notes. Chapter 7, The 6-Hour Symphony. The interrogation room was cold, lit by a single bank of fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, irritating frequency. David Brankel sat across from Detectives Larry Duncan and Joe Schlee. He wasn't the shaking, desperate fugitive they expected. He was a man who looked like he was about to deliver a keynote address. When I shook his hand, Detective Duncan later said, he moved toward me like he was going to hug me. It was surreal. For 6 hours, Brankel spoke. It was a confession. Yes, but it felt like a performance. He detailed the 43 robberies with the precision of an accountant. He spoke of the thrill, of the way the IBM name Interstate Bank Mart pleased his vanity. Donna got involved because she loved me, Brankel said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. He described how Donna Hewins, his girlfriend from the topless bar, had become his Bonnie. She had driven the getaway car watched the scanners, and shared in the adrenaline of the theft. He blamed his mother. He blamed his estrangement from his wife. He blamed the world for not recognizing his genius. He had absolutely no conscience, reporter Andrew Wolfson noted. He was a sociopath in the sense that he could look at the people he ruined and feel nothing. While he was confessing to the robberies, he was silent about the Logans and the Sperrys. To David, stealing from a bank was a profession. Stealing from friends was just business. He insisted he had done legitimate work for the Logans, even as their life savings vanished into his BMW and his designer suits. Chapter 8. The Wake of the Bandit. The fallout of David Brankel's 43-hit spree wasn't just measured in the $136,000 stolen from banks. It was measured in the shattered trust of the small towns he had infected. In Vincennes, Alan and Becky Logan stood in their pet store, looking at the empty space where Logan's great escape was supposed to be. They had lost thousands, but more than that, they had lost their faith in their own judgment. "We thought he was God's gift to us," Becky said, her eyes brimming with tears. And all the while, he was bringing his son Michael into our shop, using the boy as a prop to make us trust him more. Phil Sperry in Bloomington felt the same sting of regret. "I feel responsible for the damage done to our friends." I let him in. Brankel was sentenced to 21 years. Donna Hewins received house arrest and 5 years probation, a light sentence that many in the task force felt didn't match her role as the bandit's shadow. As the gates of the federal prison in Minnesota closed behind him, David Brankel likely didn't think of the Logans or the tellers he had terrified. He was thinking of the next interstate, the next mask, the next chance to prove he was the smartest man in the room. Part 3. The Persistence of Shadows. Chapter 9. The Phantom of North Hollywood. The most terrifying thing about men like Barnbaum and Brankel is that they never truly stop being the characters they've created. In 2000, Gerald Barnbaum, now 74, was being transferred between prisons. Because he was classified as low security, the Bureau of Prisons gave him a bus ticket and told him to report to a facility in Illinois. It was an invitation for a final act. He never showed up. A month later, U.S. Marshals tracked a lead to a small clinic in North Hollywood. They walked inside and called out his name. Gerald Barnbaum. A man stepped out from a back room. He was wearing a white coat. He had a stethoscope draped around his neck. He looked every bit the professional, the healer, the doctor. He looked at the marshals and smiled a weary, knowing smile. "You guys are good," he simply said. Even at 74, with decades of prison behind him and more ahead, he couldn't resist the siren call of the white coat. He had been billing insurance companies for $350,000 in services he wasn't qualified to provide. He had seen hundreds of patients, prescribing controlled substances and performing exams, a ghost haunting the living. Epilogue. The cost of the character. Today, The names Gerald Barnbaum and David Brinkle are etched into the annals of American crime not as masterminds, but as warnings. Barnbaum's legacy is a pile of multi-million-dollar lawsuits and a trail of families, like the Mackenzies, who will never know what John might have become. His projected release in 2018 was a date many hoped he would never see as a free man. Brinkle's legacy is the Interstate Bank Mart Bandit, a title he wears with a perverse pride in his cell. The $175,000 he owes in restitution is a number on a page, a debt that will never be paid to the shopkeepers and neighbors he betrayed. In the flickering light of the interstate or the sterile hum of a clinic, the shadows of these men remain. They remind us that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife, it's a smile, a tailored suit, and a story that is just too good to be true. The mirror does not lie, but the man standing before it will continue to try until the very last curtain falls. The Architecture of Deception, a novel based on the shadows of American greed. Prologue, The Mask. In the grand theater of the American dream, identity is the most flexible currency. We are told from birth that we can be whoever we want to be. But for most, that is a metaphor for ambition. For some, however, that promise is taken with a chilling, surgical literalness. To them, a name is just a label on a suit. A set of credentials is a costume, and a life is a long-running stage play where the audience, the neighbors, the co-workers, the spouses never knows they're watching a performance until the final curtain falls. By then, the lead actor has already made off with the box office receipts, leaving behind a wake of hollowed-out lives and shattered trust. This is a story of to such actors. The first wore a white coat, a stethoscope draped around his neck like a sacred vestment. He moved through the sterilized halls of clinics with an authority that commanded respect. Yet he was a man who healed none and haunted many. His medicine was a lie, and his diagnosis was a death sentence for those who looked into his eyes and saw a savior. The second drove a black BMW, a sleek shadow that blurred along the veins of the Midwest interstates. He was a ghost who turned the mundane act of grocery shopping into a high-stakes heist, a man who could charm a city as an entrepreneur by day and rob its lifeblood by night. They never met, yet they shared the same dark DNA of deception. They built cathedrals of lies, brick by fraudulent brick, convinced that the architecture they had designed was indestructible. But gravity always wins. Eventually, the weight of the truth becomes too heavy, and the ceilings come crashing down on the architects themselves. Part I, The White Coat Shadow. Chapter 1, The Audition. Orange County, California. 1979. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and exhaust, the golden California sun beating down on the Pacific Southwest Medical Group. Inside, the environment was a sharp contrastal, sterile, and smelling of isopropyl alcohol. Rick D'Alessandro, a young and earnest physician's assistant, adjusted his clipboard. He watched the man he knew as Dr. Gerald Barnes with a mixture of admiration and professional curiosity. Barnes was a likable little guy, witty, sharp, and possessed of a bedside manner that was almost supernatural in its ability to put patients at ease. He didn't just walk through the halls, he glided with an effortless authority, his lab coat always crisp, his glasses perched perfectly on the bridge of his nose. "You're doing great work, Rick," Barnes said, pausing at the nurse's station to flash a smile that seemed to radiate genuine warmth. "The Mackenzie file is on my desk. I'll see him next." Rick felt a surge of pride. In the high-pressure world of Orange County medicine, working under a director like Barnes felt like a calling. Barnes was the kind of man who had an answer for everything, a community fixture who seemed to embody the very essence of a healer. But if Rick had looked closer, if he had searched the office for the stacks of deep, technical journals or the subtle nuances of diagnostic debate that usually characterized a veteran doctor, he might have noticed the cracks. Behind the designer glasses, Gerald Barnbaum's eyes weren't looking at symptoms, they were gauging reactions. He wasn't practicing medicine, he was practicing theater. Barnbaum was a failed pharmacist from Chicago with a revoked license and a history of Medicaid scams that had left him bitter and hungry for a new stage. In California, he had found his greatest role yet. He had discovered a real Dr. Gerald Barnes, a surgeon in Stockton, and like a skilled identity thief, he had stripped the man's credentials and wore them like a second skin. He had called the medical board, spun a pathetic tale of a lost license in a move to a new clinic, and they had simply sent him a duplicate. No background check, no fingerprinting. Just a piece of paper that transformed a con man into a god. He saw 40 patients a day. To him, they weren't people with fears and families, they were script pages. He was the star of the show, and the applause was the steady stream of insurance checks and the blind trust of the sick. And on the morning of December 26th, a man named John Mackenzie walked onto his stage, unaware that he was about to become the victim of a fatal performance. Chapter 2: The Syrup in the Veins. John Mackenzie was 29 years old, but as he sat on the crinkled paper of the exam table, he looked 60. His skin was the color of old parchment, drawn tight over his cheekbones. He stumbled as he tried to find his footing, his breath coming in shallow, sweet-smelling rasps that filled the small room. "I'm just so thirsty, Doc," Mackenzie whispered, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Dizzy. Can't keep my balance. It's like the world is spinning even when I'm sitting still." Barnbaum, the man Mackenzie trusted with his life, barely looked up from the chart. He was tired, perhaps bored of the minor complaints of the morning. He saw a man with equilibrium issues. He didn't see the classic, screaming signs of ketoacidosis. He didn't see the fruity breath that any first-year medical student would have recognized as the body turning its own blood into acid. It's an inner ear thing, John, Barnbaum said smoothly, his voice a practiced baritone of reassurance. He didn't order an immediate finger prick glucose test. He didn't check for dehydration. He simply scribbled a prescription for an anti-vertigo drug. Take these. Get some rest. We'll run some routine labs. But I wouldn't worry. You're just a bit run down. Mackenzie nodded, clutching the slip of paper like a lifeline. He went home to his quiet kitchen, took the pills that would do nothing for the sugar ravaging his organs, and waited to feel better. He drank water by the gallon, his body desperately trying to flush out the poison until he eventually collapsed. The labs came back the next day. Barnbaum was off, enjoying the fruits of his fraud. Rick D'Alessandro was the one who pulled the chart. His heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt. 1200, Rick whispered into the silence of the empty office. A normal blood sugar level was 100. John Mackenzie's blood was thick with glucose, a syrup that was systematically shutting down his brain and organs. He wasn't suffering from vertigo. He was dying. Rick scrambled. He called Mackenzie's house, no answer. He called the emergency contacts, the ex-wife, the friends no one had seen him. Panic, cold and sharp, set in. Rick called the Garden Grove police. When they broke down the door, they found Mackenzie on the kitchen floor. He was cold. In his hand, he still clutched the prescription for dizziness the final, damning proof of a doctor who had looked at a dying man and seen only a routine appointment. Chapter 3, The Image in the Facts. The death of John Mackenzie should have been a tragedy of medical incompetence. But for Rick D'Alessandro, it felt like something darker, something deliberate. He couldn't shake the memory of Barnes's nonchalance. A doctor with that much experience on paper shouldn't have missed a blood sugar of 1,200. It was an impossibility in the world of real medicine, driven by a gut instinct he couldn't name. Rick went to the phone. He called the medical board in Sacramento. I need to verify the credentials of Dr. Gerald Barnes, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Can you fax over his ID and photo? We've had a complication here. The fax machine in the corner groaned to life, the high-pitched digital whine echoing through the sterile office. Rick watched the paper slide slowly into the tray, inch by agonizing inch. He picked it up, expecting to see the likable little guy he worked with every day. The man in the photo was a stranger. He was older, with different features, a different jawline. The real Dr. Gerald Barnes was an orthopedic surgeon in Stockton, 400 miles away, likely performing surgery at that very moment. The man standing in the clinic in Orange County, the man who had let John Mackenzie die, was a ghost. My God, Rick breathed, the paper shaking in his hands. He's a fraud. The whole thing, it's all a lie. The investigation revealed the truth. Gerald Barnbaum, the pharmacist actor, He was arrested for manslaughter and practicing without a license. But in the legal system of the early 1980s, identity theft was a novelty, a victimless bureaucratic crime. He was sentenced to 3 years. He served 18 months. When he walked out of prison, he didn't feel remorse for the life he had extinguished. He didn't think of John Mackenzie's 4-year-old daughter, Jill, who would grow up with a hollow space where a father should have been. Instead, Gerald Barnbaum looked at his reflection in a bus window. He smoothed his hair, straightened an imaginary tie, and prepared for his next audition. If Gerald Barnes didn't work, there were plenty of other doctors in the phone book. Chapter 4, The FBI's Physician. By 1996, Barnbaum had perfected the cycle of the parasite. He would exit a prison gate, find a new city, steal the Barnes identity again, and find a clinic with an HR department too busy or too lazy to do a deep dive into his past. He even managed to weave a web of domestic normalcy. Lisa Roberts thought she had found the perfect husband. He was romantic, successful, and carried the prestige of a medical director in Los Angeles. He brought home a 6-figure salary, they went to concerts, and they planned for a future filled with children and their own private practice. I didn't know his real name. Lisa would later tell investigators, her voice hollow with the trauma of a stolen life. I didn't know his real age. I didn't know who I was sharing my bed with. I was married to a physician, or so I thought. He wore the coat every day. He came home smelling like the hospital. The irony reached a peak of American tragedy. Barnbaum was so convincing that even the FBI hired him. He performed physicals on over 100 federal agents. The very men and women trained to spot deception and track down fugitives sat on his exam table, let him listen to their hearts, and handed him their absolute trust. But the past is a persistent hunter. Rick D'Alessandro, now years older, but with a memory that wouldn't fade, walked into a Christmas party and saw a familiar face. A face that belonged in a mugshot, not a ballroom. "Hi, Rick," the imposter said, his voice as smooth as silk, as if the death of John Mackenzie had been a mere clerical error. "I'm not doing too well, Gerald," Rick replied, his voice low and dangerous. "Because you're doing the same thing you did in the 70s. And I'm going to make sure this is the last time." The curtain finally fell for good. Barnbaum was sentenced to over 12 years. The real Dr. Barnes was in the courtroom to see it. He watched as the aging con man, now 62, cried about his own health, prostate cancer, diabetes, pleading for mercy he had never shown his patients. The judge looked at the ultimate narcissist and saw no soul, only a hollow shell that needed a stolen coat to feel human. "If I set you free," the judge said, "there is a 100% chance you would do this again. You are addicted to the lie." Part 2, The Interstate Phantom. Chapter 5, The Bloomington Charm. While Barnbaum was playing God in the clinics of California, Another man was mastering the art of the long con in the quiet streets of Bloomington, Indiana. David Brankel was a man of impeccable taste. He was smooth, dapper, and spoke with the confident cadence of a man who owned the very ground he walked on. In 1999, he rented an office from Phil and Bonnie Sperry, claiming to be the visionary behind ACR architecture, construction, and remodeling. He always had the right response to any question, Phil Sperry recalled. He was cool. He was very smooth. You wanted to believe in him because he believed in himself so much. Brankel used the Sperry name like a skeleton key to the city's trust. He opened accounts at high-end boutiques, ran up thousands in bills at Sullivan's clothing store because he needed to look the part, and charmed the local business community into believing he was the next big developer. He even convinced Bonnie to start an interior design firm called Trade Secrets. But Brankel's true trade was a secret even from his own family. He lived a split-screen life that would have exhausted a lesser man. Sunday through Wednesday, he was the devoted husband and father in Vincennes, Indiana, living in a rented house and playing the role of the struggling but honest consultant. Thursday through Saturday, he disappeared into the safe zone of Bloomington and beyond. There, he wasn't David the father. He wasn't even David the architect. He was the interstate bankmart bandit. Chapter 6, The Alchemy of the Road. David Brankel sat in his black BMW, the engine alow, expensive per as he idled near a major grocery store in Louisville. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He wore a fishing Hattaboonie hat and a fake mustache that looked just real enough in the grainy light of a security camera. He didn't hit the big, marble-pillared banks in the city centers. Those had too much security, too many eyes, and too many armed guards. He hit the bankmarts, the small branches tucked inside grocery stores. People are distracted there, he would later muse. They're thinking about the grocery list, the milk, the eggs. They aren't thinking about a robbery. He stepped out of the car, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. But his hands were steady. This was his architecture. This was his construction. Inside the store, he approached the teller. He didn't pull a gun, though he often had one tucked away. He didn't need the noise. He simply handed over a note. It was clean, printed, and calculated to inspire maximum compliance through minimum effort. This is a hold-up. I have a gun. Be calm. Both drawers. Be quiet. Go home alive. The teller, eyes wide with a primal fear that Brankel found intoxicating, emptied the drawers. He took the cash $6,000 this time and walked out. He didn't run. Running attracted attention. He strolled. A dapper man in a fishing had just finishing his errands. Outside, Donna Hewins waited in the driver's seat of the BMW. Donna was his Bonnie, a waitress from a topless bar who had fallen for the smooth-talking businessman. She had watched him descend into this life and, eventually, she had joined him. What would you think of me He had asked her, testing the waters of her loyalty, "If I told you I rob banks for a living, I would still love you," she had whispered, and in that moment, the pact was sealed. The BMW merged onto the interstate. Brankel loved the interstates. I-65, I-70, I-75. They were the arteries of his empire. He could hit a bank in Louisville and be in Cincinnati for dinner, then back in Bloomington by midnight. He was a ghost in the machine of the American highway system, a man who built a fortune $5,000 at a time. Chapter 7, The Task Force. Detective Larry Duncan of the Louisville Metro Police was a man of patterns. He had spent 11 years chasing robbers, and he knew that every criminal had a rhythm. By 2002, the IBM bandit was his obsession. He saw the proximity to the interstates. He saw the fishing hats and the tan coveralls in every grainy surveillance photo. He began to map the robberies like a meteorologist tracking a storm. "He's doing the same thing I'm doing," Duncan told his task force, gesturing to the computer screen. "He's sitting at a computer, looking at MapQuest, planning his next exit. He's not a thug, he's an analyst." Duncan coordinated a massive effort involving 1,200 officers. He called it Operation Intercept. They placed undercover detectives inside grocery store banks, dressed as tellers. They waited in the sweltering Indiana and Kentucky heat. On September 6, 2003, the trap was set. Brankel hit a U.S. bank in Louisville, exactly where Duncan's math said he would. Operation Intercept. The radio crackled with a frantic energy. The police surged. They flooded the interstates, looking for a black BMW. But Brankel, possessing the heightened senses of a predator, felt the shift in the environment. He didn't take the highway home. He took the back roads, the winding rural routes through the cornfields where the sirens were just a distant hum. He slipped through the noose again. Larry Duncan sat in his office, the map of 35 robberies staring back at him. "We missed him," he whispered. "He's gone, and he's probably laughing at us." Chapter 8, The Final Pursuit. Greed is a hungry god. By December 2003, Brankel had committed 43 robberies. He was a legend in his own mind, convinced he was the most successful bank robber in American history. He was untouchable, but even the best architects make mistakes when they're in a hurry. On December 29th, Brankel was speeding through Bloomington. He had just finished another job and was eager to get back to his normal life. He cut off a vehicle on Highway 45, nearly causing a head-on collision. The driver of that vehicle was Detective Kevin Hill. Hill saw the black BMW weave into oncoming traffic and lose control. He saw the dapper driver, not a criminal, but a man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom. Hill pulled him over. "Hands where I can see them," Hill shouted, his training kicking in as he approached the window. Brankel hesitated. He looked at the officer. He looked at his young son, Michael, sitting in the passenger seat with a bill for his consulting work in his small hand. In that moment, the two lives of David Brankel the father and the Phantom collided with the force of a train wreck. He didn't surrender. He slammed the car into drive and took off. The pursuit reached 100 miles per hour. Brankel ran innocent people off the road, disregarding stop signs and intersections. He was a man possessed, trying to drive away from the reality of his own reflection. He eventually ditched the car in Vincennes, fleeing on foot and leaving his own child behind in the abandoned BMW. He was caught a few blocks away, tripping over a curb in an apartment complex, as Sergeant Winkler forced his arms behind his back. A small knife fell from Brankel's pocket. It just fell out. Brankel stammered, his dapper facade finally crumbling into the dirt. "I'm the IBM bandit. Call Louisville. They'll know who I am." Epilogue: the ruins of the architects. In the end, the two men were united not by their crimes, but by the debris they left behind. Gerald Barnbaum, the phony doctor, was ordered to serve nearly 30 years in prison. He left behind a trail of medical malpractice, the ghost of John Mackenzie, and a wife whose sense of reality was permanently scarred. Even at 74, he remained a man who would likely reach for a lab coat the moment he stepped free. David Brankel, the interstate bandit, left behind 43 traumatized tellers, a ruined family, and friends like the Logans, who had been fleeced of their life savings. He was sentenced to 21 years. Neither man felt true remorse. Barnbaum blamed the medical boards. Brankel blamed his upbringing and his mother. They were the architects of their own destruction, having built their lives on the shifting, treacherous sands of the next big con, as the prison doors closed on both. The grand cathedrals of lies they had so carefully constructed vanished into the air, leaving only the cold, hard reality of the men they had tried so desperately to hide. The end. The Masks of Men, a novel based on true events. Prologue. The stage is set. The mirror does not lie, but the man staring into it can be the greatest architect of deception. In the flickering fluorescent light of a sterile clinic bathroom in Orange County, 1979, a man adjusted his stethoscope. It was a prop, though it felt as heavy and significant as a scepter. To the world, he was Dr. Gerald Barnes, a man of healing, a director of lives. In reality, he was Gerald Barnbaum, a pharmacist whose license had been stripped away in a Medicaid scandal in Chicago years prior. But Gerald didn't see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as an artist who had finally found his career-defining role. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, on the asphalt arteries that connected the heartland of America, another man was checking his reflection in the rearview mirror of a black BMW. David Brankel didn't wear a white coat. He wore the suit of an entrepreneur, the smile of a visionary, and the hidden hunger of a wolf. Two men, two lives built on the shifting sands of stolen identities and broken promises. This is the story of how they fooled the world until the world finally decided to look closer. Part 1, The Cost of Healing. Chapter 1, The Perfect Doctor. The morning air in Garden Grove was thick with the scent of jasmine and car exhaust. Inside the Pacific Southwest Medical Group, the atmosphere was a precise blend of antiseptic and hope. Rick D'Alessandro, a young and ambitious physician's assistant, sat at his desk reviewing charts. He admired his boss. Dr. Gerald Barnes was everything a medical director should be. Charismatic, approachable, and possessed of a calm authority that put even the most neurotic patients at ease. "Good morning, Rick," the doctor said, leaning against the door frame. He was a likable little guy, as Rick often thought funny, entertaining, and always ready with a witty remark to lighten the heavy load of a busy clinic day. "Morning, Doc. We've got a full house today," Rick replied, handing over a clipboard. "The more the merrier." Barnes smiled. It was a practiced smile, one that reached his eyes just long enough to be convincing. Barnbaum, the man inside the barn, skin loved the rhythm of the clinic. He loved the way people looked at him with reverence. In Chicago, he had been a pharmacist, a man behind a counter, a servant to the prescriptions written by real doctors. But here he was the source. He was the one who signed the orders. He was the star of the show. He had walked into the California Medical Board office months ago with a story of a lost license. He had used the name of a real surgeon from Stockton, a man named Gerald Barnes, whose credentials were impeccable. The board, drowning in paperwork and trusting in the sanctity of the profession, had issued him a duplicate license without a second thought. It was the easiest audition he had ever won. Chapter 2, The Case of John Mackenzie. On December 26, 1979, the holiday cheer had begun to sour into the grim reality of winter. John Mackenzie, only 29 years old, walked into the clinic. Or rather, he stumbled. He looked like a man who was evaporating from the inside out. His skin was sallow, hanging loose on his frame. His eyes were sunken, darting around with a frantic, thirsty energy. "Dr. Barnes, I don't feel right," Mackenzie whispered, his voice like dry leaves. "I'm thirsty all the time. I'm dizzy. I can't keep my balance." Barnbaum looked at the young man. To a trained physician, the symptoms shouted a singular, terrifying diagnosis: diabetes mellitus. The excessive thirst, the urination, the rapid weight loss, it was a textbook case of a body failing to process sugar. But Barnbaum wasn't a doctor. He was a man playing one. He looked at Mackenzie's vertigo and his complaints of dizziness. "It sounds like an inner ear issue, John," Barnbaum said, his voice smooth and reassuring. He scribbled a name on a prescription pad. "Anti-vertigo medication. Take these. We'll run some routine blood work, but I'm sure you'll be back on your feet in no time." Mackenzie took the slip of paper, clutching it like a lifeline. He trusted the man in the white coat. Everyone did. The blood was drawn and sent to the lab. Barnbaum went home that evening, satisfied with his performance. He didn't think twice about the young man who was currently a ticking time bomb of glucose. Chapter 3, the 1200. The next day was Dr. Barnes's day off. The clinic was quiet. The usual hum of activity dampened. Rick D'Alessandro was finishing up some paperwork when the courier from the lab arrived. Rick opened the file for John Mackenzie. He expected to see minor fluctuations, perhaps some anemia or a slight infection. His heart stopped. 1200, Rick whispered, the words catching in his throat. A normal blood sugar level was between 80 and 100. At 1,200, the blood becomes thick, like syrup. The organs begin to shut down. The brain begins to swell. It wasn't just a high reading, it was a death sentence in progress. Where is he? Rick shouted, turning to the receptionist. Where is Mackenzie? He went home yesterday. Rick, Dr. Barnes gave him some pills for dizziness. Pills? He needs a hospital. He needs N4. He's in an acute diabetic crisis. Rick grabbed the phone. He called Mackenzie's home. No answer. He called the emergency contact Tan ex-wife. She hadn't seen him. He called every number in the file, his hands shaking as he dialed. Silence! By the time the Garden Grove police broke down the door to Mackenzie's apartment, the tragedy had already played out. They found him in the kitchen, sprawled on the linoleum floor. In his cold hand was the prescription for anti-vertigo medication, the very thing that had sent him home to die instead of to the emergency room. He had collapsed into a coma and never woken up. He was 29. He left behind a 4-year-old daughter named Jill, who would never understand why her father just didn't come home. Chapter 4, The Unmasking. The grief in the clinic was palpable, but for Rick D'Alessandro, grief was quickly replaced by a cold, sharpening suspicion. How could Barnes have missed this? Even a first-year medical student would have seen the signs. The thirst, the urination, the weight loss, it was too classic, too obvious. Rick sat in the dark of the clinic office, the blue light of the fax machine the only illumination. He had called the medical board in Sacramento. He didn't tell them why. He just said he needed a verification of the director's identification for insurance purposes. Sending it to Renown, the voice on the other end said, the machine word. A sheet of thermal paper began to crawl out, inch by inch. First, the name, Gerald Barnes. Then the address, Stockton, California. Then the photo. Rick stared at the image. The man in the photo was older, with different features, a different jawline, a different soul. It wasn't the likable little guy who cracked jokes in the hallway. It was a stranger. The realization hit Rick like a physical blow. The man he had worked for, the man who had treated thousands of patients, the man whose negligence had just killed a 29-year-old father, was a ghost, a fraud. Rick picked up the phone. This time, he didn't call the medical board. He called the police. Chapter 5, The Performance of a Lifetime. When investigator Eddie Banks and Deputy D.A. James and Wright began digging into the man they knew as Barnes, they found a trail of gray spank and stage lights.